Well, I always feel a little awkward making videos like this because I'm not sure the world is really that interested in my story. But every time I do, I always get some really thoughtful feedback from people that kind of spurs me on to keep it going. So, um, the name of my channel is 35 and Retired. And I guess I chose that name because it's sort of the most odd or rare or unique or significant thing about me. Um, and retirement is related to finances. And unless you receive a big inheritance, which I didn't, then finance is related to, sort of the work that you did, how you made money and how you spent money. And so I thought I would tell my story, sort of like my work history. And I've been told a few times that it's an encouraging story to people who don't have a college degree. And ultimately, I think the story reflects God's grace in my life, not necessarily my own merit. Um, yeah, I'm basically just doing this in response to some of the comments that I've gotten from people on the channel, and really to offer someone else maybe some encouragement. And maybe one last comment before I begin. I was out to dinner with some friends recently, and they have a son who is in high school and reminds me very much of myself, in both good and bad ways. Some of the things he's doing that are disruptive remind me of things I did, and some of the questions he's asking, which are provocative and philosophical, remind me of questions I asked. And so as I just was kind of sharing with my friends, what I was thinking when I was that age, I realized that it could be of some benefit to somebody. So, all right. So probably the story basically begins with when I started mowing lawns for money when I was in fifth or sixth grade. I don't remember exactly what age it was, but I started mowing lawns around my neighborhood. Not that many, just maybe two or three a week. And they weren't like regular customers every single week, but I would just kind of go knock on their doors and do it often, occasionally. And I lived in Michigan, and when the snow came down, I would go shovel walks, and later I would use the snowblower that belonged to my dad. Um, and I remember one day in particular, we got a snow day, and I was up first thing in the morning, and I went out with my buddy Curtis, and we shoveled and snowblowed all day. We made like $350, which for like a sixth grader was like serious money. And I sort of, I guess from that moment forward, like kind of always wanted to earn money and have it in my pocket. In sixth grade, I had a friend lead me into some really bad stuff. And he's guilty for leading and I'm guilty for following. But he basically taught me how to steal. We would steal candy and CDs and magazines from stores. And when I was in sixth grade, I actually went to a high school graduate party with this friend, and he and I stole three girls' purses out of the back room and raided them and pitched the contents and walked home with a bunch of money. And several weeks or maybe months later, this friend of mine was caught in a store stealing, and his parents kind of raided his room and found all kinds of items that they had kind of figured out he hadn't bought, and he ratted me out, and I denied it for several days and finally caved, and my parents ended up having me repay what I had stolen times three to all of the merchants that I admitted to stealing from. And I wrote out the 10 Commandments and highlighted "Thou shalt not steal" to maybe 9 or 10 merchants, as well as these girls. And that's not exactly part of my work history, but it does tell you something about my experience with money, and obviously a bad, sinful decision that I made as a sixth grader. Yeah, so after my eighth grade and after my ninth grade year of school, I got a job at a deli in the summer and a little bit through the school year, Penniman Deli in Plymouth, Michigan. I was making $7 an hour. I was like making submarine sandwiches and serving salads and things like that. And it wasn't a lot of money, but again, I liked having that money in my pocket. I rode my bike 2 miles from my house to downtown, And so I had my own transportation and my independence. And what's probably worth mentioning is that during this time, I was an awful student. So I was homeschooled for kindergarten and first grade. And then I was put into a school called Northville Christian School in Northville, Michigan. I went there from second to sixth grade, and then I went to a different private school called PCA in Canton, Michigan from seventh grade to 12th grade. And in kindergarten, first and second, I was a great student. And then in third grade started this cycle where I basically forever became a bad student. And when I say bad, I don't just mean really in grades. I mean, I got bad grades, I clowned around, I got detentions, I got suspended. Teachers found me to be extremely disruptive and distracting. And I tell people that I basically slept, clowned, cheated, and skipped my way through junior high and high school. And I'm not proud of that. It was a wrong decision. It was a destructive decision that put me on a trajectory for total failure and a very difficult life. I think as I think back and try and analyze how I was on a good track and how I got onto the bad track, I think it had to do with the realization that I had when I was in third grade and I had a fairly incompetent teacher. I had a teacher, I won't say the name, I had a teacher who was about the age of my parents, and I know that because she had a daughter in my class. But she was very inexperienced, and while she probably knew more about math and science and English than me, her sort of classroom management skills were very poor, her people skills were very poor, her judgment was very poor, and I realized that this like relationship between adult and child or teacher and student wasn't perfect. Like the students weren't always wrong when the teacher said they were, and the teacher wasn't always right when they said they were. And there was kind of just like this facade of the teacher's always right and the students are always wrong. And I think that really ate away at me. And I sort of became a little bit too philosophical, like, well, why should I learn from you if, you're not better at me than in all these areas. And then in fourth grade, I had a really good, strong teacher. And then in fifth grade, I had a super young, inexperienced one. And then sixth grade, I had a good one. But through this cycle of poorly disciplined classrooms, I just started falling behind more and more. And school is very cumulative. And so if you don't do good in third grade, it's hard to do good in fourth grade. And then it just cascades. And so, I didn't enjoy school. In junior high, there was, basically my graduating class had like 50 kids in it, like 25 girls, 25 boys. And basically half the boys were kind of jocks and wanted to get in girls' pants. And half the guys were, nerds with graphing calculators and wanted to show each other what they had programmed over the weekend. And I was kind of in between. I wasn't the big jock guy. I wasn't the big nerdy guy. I actually picked up skateboarding, which is kind of this rebellious in-betweener type of thing. And there was really only two other kids in my class who were in that genre. One of them was a really bad influence on me. One of them, not so much. He was a fine influence, but I was a bit of kind of like a loner. Anyway, so I think work was something that I liked doing. I liked what it earned me. And it was a way to feel valuable aside from my report card. So the summer after my sophomore year, so my 10th grade summer, my uncle helped me get a job at the company he was working for called Glassworks. And basically we would cut and install mirrors, big mirrors that go in people's bathrooms, and we would install shower doors. So basically glass and mirror manufacturing and installation and things like that. And I worked full time. So literally the very first summer day after school, let out. Sorry. I worked full time, 8 or 9 hour shift. And then literally, I think it was the very last Friday before school went in. And I made $330 a week. And I cashed my paycheck every Friday. And I spent every penny I had on gas money and paintball. I played paintball like crazy that whole summer, which if you're thinking like, oh, 35 and retired, I bet he was saving every penny he ever earned. Wasn't the case. And then My junior year, my dad was on a missions trip overseas, and my car broke down. I had a 1988 Nissan 300ZX, and my car broke down, and my mom and I didn't really know what to do, so we had it towed to my dad's shop. My dad was he's retired now, but he was a small business owner, a place called Upper Level Graphics. It still exists. My sister's running the company now. And we had it towed to his shop. And when he got back in town, we said, "Hey, Dad, what do we do?" Because I knew nothing about cars. And basically, my dad's shop was in a little industrial complex with a bunch of little small businesses. And one of the small businesses was a automotive repair shop. And he's like, "Well, it's already here. Why don't you just have them look at it?" So they looked at it. They found it needed an alternator. They changed the alternator. Well, while I was paying for the alternator repair, I asked the owner, a guy by the name of James. He was 25 at the time. I basically said something very clumsily like, "Hey, I don't know anything about cars, but I'm really interested in them. I like working hard. Last summer, I worked full time in construction, and I really like working hard and earning money. If you think about giving me a job, I'd work super hard and I'd read everything that you gave me to read about cars." And by the grace of God, a few days later, he got in touch with me, and he basically said, "You can come work here." And mechanics get paid through a system called flat rate, which basically means, if a customer pays you 2 hours to change the brakes, the mechanic gets paid 2 hours, whether it takes them, 200 hours or 20 minutes. And so employing me wasn't particularly expensive for him because it sort of only cost him for the work I was doing. Nonetheless, it was a huge blessing, totally undeserved, I would say. And he started giving me books to read. And I started really reading and just devouring these books. It was kind of the first thing that I was ever choosing to read, and I was excited about, and wanted to understand more. And I was also fairly natural at reading something in a book and then sort of seeing it in real life on the car, and being able to put the pieces together of like what I had read and what that meant and how it meant in real life. And I loved tools. And so all of a sudden, junior year of high school, I was a mechanic. And I don't think I was a particularly good one. I know that I was, flat rate kind of causes you to rush. And I was a young, impatient guy. And so I know that I rushed some repairs and I cut some corners and, things like that. So I don't want you to think that I was like this amazing prodigy mechanic. I really wasn't, I would say. I started working on my certifications, the state certifications for Michigan, to sort of prove that I was competent in brakes. And so I got a couple of those state certifications, and then I started working on the ASEs, the national certifications. And so I was going to school. And so my senior year of high school, I only took, I think 4 classes was the minimum. And then basically right at lunch, I was able to go and work on cars all afternoon. And I worked Saturdays and I worked the summer. And I really loved working on cars. I mean, that was like the first intellectual type of thing that I excelled at, where reading something in a book kind of benefited me the next day on the job. And I liked working with my hands and my mind, and just the complexity and the satisfaction of solving a problem. And I remember the first engine that I rebuilt, this car comes in and it's useless. It won't move. And, you work on it for a couple of days and all of a sudden it drives away, and just that feeling of satisfaction. And when I reflect now as a 36-year-old on my life, I think that I am a fairly intellectual guy. I'm not like a total grease monkey, like just, like I've taken math, I've taken calculus classes, and I've taken philosophy classes. I mean, I enjoy intellectual debates and philosophical debates. And I think that cars was maybe just that balance between something intellectual and complicated and technical and mechanical, but also something that you could sort of touch and grab. And for whatever reason, school just didn't do that for me. So yeah, so basically, work history was basically mowing lawns, snow blowing, deli work, a little bit of light construction work, and then automotive. Well, I graduated high school in June of 2006, and there was some drama going on at the shop that I was working at, and so the owner decided to sell the shop. And so I wasn't real smart and I wasn't real wise, but I kind of figured out that he had been quite generous and kind to hire an 18-year-old. And it just dawned on me that whoever he sold the shop to probably would come in and make changes and probably wouldn't think that much of an 18-year-old kid. And so I let him know, I was extremely grateful to him, still am. I let him know that I kind of wanted to go look for another job. And so I put my resume out there on monster.com, if you remember that. And I kind of started listening and looking for another job. And so in probably October, maybe September of 2006, not that it matters, I got a job from a company, or I got a call from a company that basically installed aftermarket accessories on semi trucks. And I was a little bit green and kind of misunderstood exactly what the job was going to be. I thought it was going to be more like a diesel mechanic, I think part of that was the guy may have been a little bit may have exaggerated a little bit in terms of what we did at that company, but maybe I was also just inexperienced not to read between the lines, and so basically I left that job and I found myself basically being an installer of relatively complex aftermarket accessories for semi trucks. And I only worked that job like two and a half months before everything happened at Volkswagen. And so I'm going to end this now, and then I'm going to do part two, which is my career at Volkswagen.